Halloween Kills was the Infinity War of the cutting-edge Halloween franchise, an bold movie that improved the scope of its predecessor, but in the long run felt like an incomplete story. But as opposed to bringing things domestic with an endgame equal, Halloween Ends plays out more like Game of Thrones Season 8, a rushed access that skips over critical individual improvement, kind of just forgets about plot points from the last movies, and finally ends up betraying what made this reboot well worth watching within the first location. David Gordon Green's trilogy capper does feel like a definitive ending to the Halloween series led with the aid of Jamie Lee Curtis, but lovers might be begging for a person to take any other stab at it in preference to finishing Michael Myers' reign of terror on the sort of sour note. Did you recollect that Michael became a child who stabbed his sister, killed some babysitters, left one survivor who spent decades making ready for his return, then discovered himself trapped in her burning residence, however come what may survived, and escaped to homicide the survivor's daughter? Green and co-writer Danny McBride, running this time with Paul Brad Logan and Chris Bernier, count on you don't, as Halloween Ends kicks off with a whole flashback sequence recapping the complete story thus far. The believe problems handiest get worse from there, because the horror movie continuously reminds viewers no longer just of moments in Halloween history, however of factors that actually passed off minutes earlier than, and of character relationships that have to be obvious by way of now. Despite this whole trilogy supposedly driving at the shoulders of Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode and her trauma, Halloween Ends never dives deeper into the trauma's significance. It has multiple characters, inclusive of Laurie's granddaughter, Allison, Andy Matichak, to guilt Laurie into thinking that somehow Michael's return became her fault for obsessing over him, no matter each the audience, and multiple character witnesses like Allison herself, knowing otherwise. The tonal shift borders on victim shaming, and a complete betrayal to what was presupposed to be the core of this movie. Thankfully, Jamie Lee Curtis still shines as Laurie, who we meet right here at her exclusive factor in her existence. 4 years after her brutal come-upon, Ends reveals Laurie writing a memoir, baking pies for Allison, and flirting with Will Patton's Deputy Hawkins. After emotionally heavy performances in the previous 2 movies, it's far honestly pleasant to look Curtis get to flex her comedic muscle groups for some time, turning in some surely funny moments that ought to add gas to the fireplace of her latest remarks about wanting to do some other Freaky Friday. Though Halloween Ends appears in a massive rush to attain the finish line, it dawdles in the direction of the movement one may expect from a Halloween film. That's because maximum of the 1 minute run time is spent on Corey, who becomes a social pariah after a lethal incident one Halloween night time and gets unusually captivated with Michael Myers. If nothing else, the turn is formidable. Halloween Kills increased the scope to the whole city, and Halloween Ends makes some ambitious alternatives through Corey's storyline, because the movie explores whether or not evil is something created by means of one's surroundings or something already inside us, unshakable, and simply ready to be unleashed. Halloween Ends maintains the thread from Kills of asking whether Michael Myers is a 70-something 12 months vintage mentally ill guy or evil incarnate, a supernatural being that heals himself through the act of killing and may nearly bypass on his essence to others. Unfortunately, Green doesn't appear inquisitive about answering the big questions. Nor can he locate new ways to enliven Michael Myers, focusing on Corey for most of the runtime, and using a vastly distinctive and greater angsty tone that belongs in a Kevin Williamson Scream script as opposed to a Halloween one. He discards the modernized John Carpenter visuals and camera paintings that have become vital to his first Halloween sequel for a much less creative or energetic film in which the digicam slightly moves. There is, of root, an real confrontation between Laurie and Michael, one which arrives too little too past due after an hour of following Corey. There are some cool and ugly kills, but most of them happen off-screen or are purposefully undermined by using staging. Where Halloween Kills turned into a brutal slasher that seemed to vicinity us in the footwear of the Shape, David Gordon Green attempts everything he can to subvert the primal origins of the basis. There's almost a sense of disgrace striking over the complete film. The Halloween saga began with the aid of John Carpenter and Deborah Hill in 1978 leads to this movie, but the stop can't vindicate the lifestyles of this continuation of the tale. Even if 2018's Halloween set out to explore trauma via horror, there's not anything in Ends that can pay off the probing. The trilogy wasn't in the long run about how evil takes hold folks and creates havoc through paranoia. This was an ambitious trilogy that tried to take the Halloween franchise to new places, however it ultimately falls quick, introducing such a lot of thoughts that it speedy abandons, whilst forgetting about the one thing it turned into continually speculated to be about, Laurie Strode. Everything that isn't bluntly mentioned is swept under the rug. Michael's slaying of Karen, Judy Greer. Don't worry, approximately it. The entire town enacting mob justice against Michael Myers on the give-up of Halloween Kills, then dropping miserably. What subjects is everybody's nevertheless scared and paranoid. Instead of resolution, Halloween Ends selections up 4 years after the activities of Kills, with all and sundry having forgotten approximately Michael, and the Strodes mostly on the sidelines. Green and his cohorts reframe the action on an unrelated person, Corey Cunningham, Rohan Campbell. And as for the Shape, he's been in hiding, till Corey stokes his thirst for blood.